Hi, I'm Bruce Goldstein. I'm discussing technology transfer, and with this segment, I'm going to be giving an introduction to patents. So, some basics about patents. What is it? Well, it is a government-issued document that is publicly available. Its point is to tell the world that the government is going to grant the owner of this patent the right to stop others from making, using, selling, or importing the invention for up to about 20 years. Those are the four key rights that you have when you own a patent. And you'll notice only one of them necessarily involves money. You can infringe a patent without selling something. So I already mentioned in a prior segment why we have patents as a policy matter. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here. For patents specifically, the public learns of it. In order to get your patent, you have to tell everything about it. You give a little description, not so little, of how you go about making and using it, and you describe what it is that you claim is your invention. So in essence, you're teaching the public about what your invention is. So the public learns of it. We also learn what it doesn't cover. By having this patent out there, we encourage the patent owner to make new products. We figure out, if you're a competitor, does my product infringe this patent? You can look at the claims and say, yes, this is covered by that patent, or no, this is actually a different kind of technology, even though it looks similar. It also provides what patent lawyers call the incentive to design around. So if you know about a particular patent and want to come up with your own version of it, or your own version of the product, you can try and figure out a different way, in which case you've potentially invented something entirely new. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, once the government issues a patent, we know when that patent will expire, and everyone can now copy it freely. If people keep it secret, it's a valuable secret for as long as they can keep it secret. Now, the flip side of that is, sure, you, the owner, have the opportunity to profit, but the quid pro quo, as they say, is you have to be completely forthcoming, you, the inventor. You have to tell the world everything you know as of the day you file your application about your invention. You can't hide the ball. And if it turns out, if you get caught having done so, your patent might be declared unenforceable, or worse, void. If you are an attorney working for somebody and you participated in that, you can lose your law license. So it's a big deal to be forthcoming. And that duty of disclosure, it lasts for the entire life of the patent. So if years down the road you find out, oops, I found some reference that predated me, and maybe I wasn't the first to invent, you have to come forward and tell the patent office about it. Now, patents are limited. They're not just simply easy to get. They are very expensive. In the United States, the government fees are in the range of, I think, $5,000 to $10,000. That's just government fees. If you're paying for a lawyer, that can run you about $50,000 for a relatively straightforward patent. And then you have to go abroad, or if you want to sell it abroad, it's country specific. So you're going to be paying those fees in every country where you plan to have market exclusivity. And that often involves translation and local counsel. So for the NIH, when we file a basic international application, we tend to apply for European Union, Japan, Australia, and Canada. Those where the major markets are. That's what companies are particularly interested in. And we can expect to spend, if we spend maximizing patent life for those and every country, which we often don't do, over the life of the patent, we may end up spending $500,000 per invention. And that doesn't include if we ever get into a fight, either at the patent office or in court. I mentioned it's country specific. It takes years to obtain. How long it takes depends upon the field you're in. Chemical inventions take a different amount of time from electrical and software patents, but we're talking years. So you can, now the patent runs from when you file your application, so you want to get through the patent office as quickly as possible, but because it's such a powerful tool, and because when you claim your invention, you have to be careful not to claim something that was already in the public domain, that process is a difficult one, and getting the words in that patent right takes a good bit of time. And I should finally note, another limit on patents is it is not a monopoly. People say patent monopoly. That's actually not true. The patent is simply the opportunity for you to stop others. It gives you a space to try, but that doesn't mean you wouldn't be blocked by other patents out there. And it also doesn't mean that the product you've made is worth buying. So a monopoly only happens once you actually have a product that only you are selling. It's important to note another major limitation on patents is that the U.S. law recently changed, 2011, effective 2013. We changed from what used to be the first to invent system to the first inventor to file system. So before it was, as long as you can prove the date on which you discovered it, conceived of it, you could ignore any publications that happened after that invention date. Now it's a race to the patent office. So any disclosure that happens before you get your application on file can jeopardize whether or not you get a patent. In the United States, we have a limited grace period. If you are the one that does the disclosing, or somebody who's working with you does the disclosing, you have a year to file your patent application and still ignore the things that happened after you disclosed, but only if you are the one disclosing it. If your competitor discloses something similar to your invention, you're out of luck. Now, there are a few things that you must do or must have about your invention in order to get a patent. First, your invention must be one of these four things: a machine, a composition of matter. That bullet is usually refers to as chemical compositions. It must be an article of manufacture. This is sort of a catch-all category of things that are not machines, they're not chemical mixes, but they are still tangible items. And it could be a method or process, such as a method of making or a method of using. And it can be a combination of one of these four categories. It must also have a clear, substantial, and specific use. If all you do is say, I invented this wonderful new chemical, that's nice. What does it do? And if you can't articulate how the public could actually use it, you're not going to get a patent. But if you can say this chemical is useful for treating breast cancer, now you have something. And it doesn't necessarily matter if you don't have every possible use identified in your patent, but you must have at least one specific substantial use. It must also be novel. Now, that's the patent lawyer's term. It basically means nobody has disclosed it before you. You really are the first. You didn't see it somewhere else and then run to the patent office. It also must be what patent lawyers call non-obvious. Now, if you were to look up obvious in the dictionary definition, it would be a different definition than you'd find if you looked to what that word means in the patent dictionary. Obvious is something very specific. It's basically saying it's the quantum of difference between your invention and everything that was disclosed. So maybe your exact invention wasn't disclosed, but you've got two or three that are kind of like it, and if you put those two or three together, you basically have gotten your invention. That would be considered obvious. So your invention, if you're going to get a patent, you've got to be able to demonstrate, no, my invention is sufficiently different from everything that came before. And finally, as I said, the quid pro quo is you got to tell the world everything. So effectively, your patent is a narrative that says how to make and use your patent, how to make and use your invention, excuse me. So it has to be good enough, clear enough, specific enough, and have enough details in it that somebody could just simply take the patent and nothing more, go into their lab, and be able to make and use your technology with only a reasonable amount of tinkering to get it to work. If you've left out a secret ingredient or key step and it doesn't work elsewhere, your patent is unenforceable. Now, there are some myths about patents that I do want to clear up. The first is that somebody can get a patent to things that have already been publicly disclosed. I kind of referred to that, but where that plays into tech transfer in particular is people are casual about who they talk to. They have handshake collaborations. Well, that's great for the interpersonal relationship, but if you don't have some sort of confidentiality agreement in place, you might have just destroyed your own patent rights until you've gotten an invention, a patent application on file. Another big myth is that naturally occurring things like a genome can be patented. Several years ago, there was a to-do about filing a patent application on turmeric. Well, no, turmeric was already in existence, and its use as a dietary supplement was well known. More recently, there's a famous Supreme Court case that looked at the discovery of the breast cancer gene BRCA1 that was used as a diagnostic for breast cancer risk. The discoverer of that got a patent to not just diagnostic kits or things that were physically created by a human being. It also incorporated just simply claiming the genome, or effectively. All they did is they snipped out the front and back of that particular gene and claimed that. And the Supreme Court reiterated, no, you actually can't get a patent to things that existed before you came along. If you just walk down a pathway in a forest, you pull a leaf off a tree, you chew it, your headache goes away. You can't patent the leaf, you can't patent the tree, you can't patent the genome. Those existed before you discovered them. To get a patent, you've got to transform it in some way. Do something that is truly human invention. So you have to take that leaf, go back to your lab, extract the compound and put it into a pill form. Now you've got an invention. So in the context of the BRCA1, I said the cDNA, or the kit that had the gene attached to a silicon wafer. These are things that don't exist anywhere in nature. A human had to have intervened to do something. So now you've got a patent. Another myth, patenting requires social or scientific merit. No, actually it doesn't. One of my favorite patents out there is a patent to what are called toe clips. So this invention, you're lying on a beach and you want to get an even tan on your feet, but you're worried that you might actually fall asleep and your toes would splay open, your feet would not align properly, so somebody invented clips to hold your big toes together while you tan. Well, who cares about this particular product? It has no social or scientific merit, but it's an invention. The patent office isn't going to get into the question of, is your invention a good thing? That's for the market to decide. So it can be completely ridiculous and yet patentable. Patenting requires showing that it works better than everything else. No, actually, there are an awful lot of patents to things that are not as good as what's already in the market. Patent office does not care about that. All they care about is that it does what you say it does, and it is truly new. Another myth is that patent inventions are safe to use. Nope. There are plenty of patents to explosives, to drugs that are poisonous, to other kinds of things. No, it doesn't have to be safe to use. It just has to do what you say it does. And finally, that the invention actually works. So the Patent Office doesn't make you prove that you actually have that your invention will do as you say. The thing is, if it doesn't, if it turns out you're wrong and you just predicted that it would work, and it turns out, no, it doesn't, you've just spent 50 grand on something you can't possibly enforce. Congratulations, you've just bought beachfront property in Nebraska. Well, it's your money to spend. So that sounds great. Why don't we get patents all the time? Well, at least with the NIH, and I know this is true for many universities as well, no, we don't. Publication is still the preferred means for getting discoveries out to the public. If that's all it takes to get it utilized, great, publish. What we use it for is that paradigm problem that we saw at the beginning, where nobody is going to take that invention, that discovery, and turn it into a product unless they have some measure of exclusivity to recoup their investment in it. And for drugs, particularly for the NIH, we find that it costs certainly hundreds of millions of dollars, often billions of dollars, and that's before the marketing budget of the company to turn that product into to turn that invention into an actual product. And we are not set up to actually do all of that work. We can do pieces of it, but ultimately, we need a company to turn it into an actual drug or diagnostic or vaccine. So we have to recruit a company, and they need that period of exclusivity to recoup their hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, one other thing about the NIH is we tend not to patent things that we call research tools. These are things that are primarily useful for doing research. Even if it is patentable, even if we could make $1 bazillion by licensing it out, we'd rather simply get that into the hands of our researchers with as few barriers as possible, including paying us a royalty. Now, how do you tell whether you have a research tool? Well, I've given you some characteristics. Usually, it's only useful for a little while before some better research tool comes along. It's fully developed. Researchers can start using it as soon as they learn about it. And of course, the primary market, if we were to sell a product, is going to be to other researchers. So examples, animal models, drug targets, PCR primers, other things like that. We don't patent those things per se. Now, it's true, if you go out and look, there are some NIH-owned inventions or government-owned inventions that cover these research tools. If that happens as part of a broader patent that's primarily focused at one of these more appropriate technologies, we simply don't enforce those elements of that patent for researchers. If somebody comes to us and says, look, we'd like to practice the research aspect, certainly for universities, we're not going to charge them. For companies, we charge them a very small amount, but the general idea is it's free for minimal barriers for doing research. But the thing to note about a patent is if all you do is get a patent, it's a document with a pretty ribbon on it. That's all it is. What matters is what you do with it. And when you start looking at all the fights that go on over patents, it's not over whether the patent itself is appropriate. It's usually because somebody is being a royal pain in the you-know-what. They're doing something aggressive, stupid. They're trying to extract every possible penny they could get, when in fact, if they just simply relaxed and cooperated with others, there would never have been a problem that would have driven them to court. We at the NIH, what we do, our approach, we strongly prefer licensing non-exclusively. 80% more or less of our licenses are non-exclusive licenses. We also, well, Congress mandated that we do so, we have a preference for small businesses. Now, we can only license to those companies that come to us, so we do get a lot of large companies that come to us. But when a small company comes and is competing against a large, and both of them could get it to market plausibly, we prefer licensing to the small business. We have quite a few licenses with startups. We have licenses internationally. There is no limit to who can apply for a license. We do grant exclusive licenses, but we try and make sure that it's only for those times when it is appropriate. So for therapeutics, vaccines, some diagnostics, and some devices where, yeah, it's going to take a massive investment to turn that into a product. When we do license, we try and make sure that the scope of the license is appropriate. So yeah, we might license a cancer drug to a company, but we're not going to give them all kinds of cancers. We might simply say it's for breast cancer while licensing exclusively to somebody else for lung cancer or lymphoma. We include enforceable benchmarks and what we call take-back clauses. The idea here is to say, yeah, we're giving you exclusivity, but you can't sit on it. So we're going to check in every year or more to say, how are you coming? Have you gotten through your animal studies, which you promised to do by now? Have you gotten to first dosing? And while we work with them, we're not trying to penalize them. It's not a rigid clock. We do want to make sure they are making progress. And if they've hit snags, sure, we'll change the timeline to approach it. We realize that product development is a very messy thing. But if we find out, no, you haven't done any research in a year, we're going to say, you know what? Let's kill it, and we'll try and find somebody else who actually is. We always reserve the right to grant others research licenses. So yeah, even if we give you exclusivity, we're still going to say you can't stop other researchers from doing research on this technology. We are required by law to reserve a right that says, look, if you're going to sell product in the United States and it involves our technology, you got to make it in the United States. The Bayh-Dole Act, Stevenson-Weidler, federal FTTA, all of these laws were unapologetically job-creating laws. They were designed to stimulate the economy. So yeah, if you're going to utilize something that U.S. taxpayers funded, you better make it here. Now, there are times when it's really ridiculous to require that, so a company can ask for a waiver in a particular circumstance. But you got to agree to it as a general proposition. And finally, yeah, we do charge a royalty. And it's commensurate with the value added, the risk, how much other things they bring to the table. But it's only fair that if the company's going to profit from a taxpayer-funded invention, that the taxpayers at least get a fair return on their invention. And I will be talking about those results in another segment. So I hope you found this useful. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please contact the program coordinator.